My darling Virgo, I see you. I see what you have been carrying, and I want to begin tonight by naming a specific kind of loneliness that I do not think anybody has ever described to you properly, because it does not look like loneliness from outside, and it does not have a name. You are not lonely in the ordinary sense. A great many of you have people, partners, families, friendships of 30 years, colleagues who like you, a phone that does ring. Here is the version you actually have. You are the one who does the understanding. In every relationship in your life, you are the person running the instrument. You know their patterns. You know what a particular silence means, and which of their moods precedes which behavior, and what they are actually upset about when they say they are upset about something else. You know the histories, the sore subjects, the anniversaries nobody else remembers. You adjust for all of it, continuously, without being asked, and largely without being noticed. And nobody is running that instrument on you. That is the thing, my darling. Not that you are unloved, which for most of you is not true. That you are the witness in every room you enter, and you have never once been witnessed back at anything like the same resolution. And you have stopped expecting it. That is the part I want to speak to most tonight, because a person who has stopped expecting something does not simply go without it. She begins, quite skillfully, and entirely without deciding to prevent it. Stay with me, because I am going to do 4 things. First, I will explain why your sign specifically ends up in the witness position, and it is structural, and it is not because you are self-effacing. Then, I am going to give you the 5 things you do that make you difficult to understand. 5. And every one of them is a virtue, which is why nobody has ever pointed them out to you, and which is why they have gone on for 30 years. Then 2 stories, one where somebody was finally understood, and one where somebody was not. And at the very end, I will tell you the single most useful thing I know about this. And I want to warn you now that it is going to offend you slightly for about 30 seconds, because it concerns the one quality you value in yourself above all others, and it says something about that quality you will not enjoy hearing. It is not an attack on it. It is the most liberating thing I have to give you, and it takes about a minute to become that, and I need you to be there for the whole minute. I am Madame Aurora, 35 years studying the stars from my office in Manhattan, and let me be honest with you before we go further, because honesty is what your sign actually trusts, and warmth without accuracy makes you suspicious, correctly. This reading is not tied to any week or month or year. I built it that way deliberately. Readings on this subject are very often constructed around a passing alignment and given a date, and somebody finds one 2 years later and is told a person is arriving who was arriving in a window that closed long ago. Everything I say tonight rests on the permanent structure of your sign, and it will be as accurate whenever you find it as it is tonight. Now let me tell you why you are the witness, because it comes first and everything follows from it. Your sign is ruled by Mercury, which you share with Gemini, and you are the only 2 signs in the zodiac who share a ruler. In Gemini, it faces outward and transmits. In you, it faces inward and analyzes. Same instrument, reversed polarity. And what that reversal produces is the finest perceptual apparatus in the zodiac. You notice things. Not vaguely and not intuitively, which is a different mechanism belonging to the water signs. Specifically, you register the detail that shifted, the word somebody used that was not quite their usual word, the fractional change in a tone, the thing that was not said. That is not a personality quirk, my darling. It is what a Mercury-ruled Earth sign is for, and it is why your assessments of people are so consistently correct and so consistently impossible to justify to anybody who asks how you knew. And there is a second structural fact, and this is the one that puts you in the witness chair rather than simply making you observant. Your sign governs the 6th house, and the 6th house is the house of service. Not servitude, and I want to be precise, because the popular reading of your sign is insulting and inaccurate. Service in the older sense. The house of being useful, of the work that maintains a system, of attending to what a situation requires. So you have a superb perceptual instrument sitting inside a sign whose orientation is toward what is needed, which means you do not merely notice things about people. You notice, and then you adjust, and the adjusting is automatic and continuous, and it happens before you have consciously registered the noticing. My darling, That combination is the reason you are in every room as an observer rather than as a subject. You are not withholding yourself. You are occupied. You cannot be the object of attention in a room while you are the one monitoring the room, and you have been monitoring since you were about 6 years old. There are 2 rhythms worth knowing as well. Mercury turns retrograde 3 or 4 times a year, for roughly 3 weeks each time, and this will keep happening for the whole of your life. Every sign feels it. Yours feels it structurally. And here is what matters tonight. During those weeks, the instrument turns backward, and a considerable number of Virgos become aware of their own accumulated unsaid material during one of them. If you have ever, in a quiet 3-week stretch, felt an unexpected surge of something that resembled resentment and did not have an object, that was the file opening. And there is the 12-year rhythm of Jupiter passing through your 7th house of partnership, which coincides, in a great many Virgo lives, with the arrival of a person who does the thing this entire video is about. Now let me show you the card. Card, singular. I pulled one tonight, and I want to tell you why there is not a second, because the reason is the reading. Understanding is a 2-person event. There is no third party in it. Any additional card would describe somebody who is not relevant to what actually has to happen here, and this subject does not need more moving parts, it needs fewer. So there is one, and it is the 2 of Cups. 2 figures standing opposite each other, each holding a cup. Above them, a winged lion's head and 2 serpents entwined around a staff. And here is what I want you to notice, because everybody looks at that card and sees romance, and the romance is the least interesting thing in it. Both of them are holding a cup out. Not one offering and one receiving. Both. The entire structure of that image is symmetrical, and the exchange it depicts cannot happen unless both parties extend something, and if either one holds their cup back, the card simply does not function. My darling, that is why it appeared for you tonight. You have been the figure on one side of that image, holding your cup, extended, patiently, for years, doing the offering, and waiting for somebody to be the other figure. And here is the part that will be uncomfortable. In a great many Virgo lives, the person opposite has been holding theirs out as well, and has been waiting, and neither of you has stepped forward, because you have both been offering, and neither of you has been receiving, and offering is the only half of the transaction your sign has ever practiced. The 2 serpents on the staff are worth a word as well. They are the caduceus, and it is the emblem of Mercury, which is your own ruler, and it is sitting directly above 2 people attempting to understand one another. That is not a coincidence in a spread about your sign. Your ruler is the planet of transmission, and what is being asked of you here is not more perception. You have enough perception. It is transmission, which is the half of Mercury your sign does not use. Hold that image. I will come back to it at the very end, and there is one more thing in it I have not said. Now let me give you the 5. There are 5 things you do that make you difficult to understand, and I want to say before I begin that every one of them is a virtue. That is precisely why nobody has ever mentioned them to you, and why they have run unchallenged for 30 years. The first is that you answer the first question completely, and then you pivot. Somebody asks how you have been, and you tell them, accurately, in about 2 sentences, and the 2 sentences are true and well-constructed, and they close the subject. And then you ask about them. My darling, watch yourself do it, because you will do it within the next week and you will not notice. The pivot is so fast and so smooth that it does not register as a maneuver, and to the person opposite it does not look like modesty. It looks like a completed exchange. You answered, the subject is finished, and now it is their turn. Nobody asks the second question, and you have been reading a lifetime of nobody asking the second question as evidence that people are not interested in you. They are not asking, my darling, because you closed it. A polite person does not reopen a subject that the other party has visibly finished with, and what you produce is a visibly finished subject, delivered warmly, followed by an invitation to talk about them instead. The second is that you qualify everything. Every statement you make about your own experience arrives with a proportionality clause attached. It was difficult, but it was fine. I am tired, but everyone is. It was a hard year, though obviously nothing compared to what she went through. I might be overreacting. You are being accurate, I know that. Your sign genuinely does not want to overstate a thing, and overstatement feels to you like a small dishonesty, and there is real integrity in it. But listen to what the qualification does to the listener. You have handed them a statement and then, in the same breath, told them how much weight to give it, and the weight you have specified is small. So they give it small weight. They are not being callous, they are following your instruction, which you issued clearly, and which they have no reason to override. The third is that you present conclusions rather than process. By the time you tell anybody about something difficult, you have finished it. You have thought it through, arrived somewhere, and constructed an account that is orderly and resolved. And what you deliver is the summary, in the past tense, with the ending already attached. My darling, a summary is not something a person can be present for. There is nothing for them to do. They cannot help, or wonder alongside you, or be with you inside it, because it is over, and you have brought them the report. And this is the single largest reason people who genuinely love you do not know what you have been through. They were not excluded from your difficulties. They were simply always told afterward, in the completed version, at a point when the only available response was a comment on something that had already concluded. The fourth follows from it, and it is the one that costs the most. You never say it while it is happening. Not out of secrecy, because during it you are managing it, and speaking about a thing while managing it feels to your sign like a lapse in the managing. You will tell somebody once it is under control, which is a way of saying you will tell them once you no longer require anything. And the fifth is the one nobody has ever named for you, and it is the most consequential. You test with the wrong person, and then you draw a conclusion from the result. This is how it goes. Somewhere in you there is a genuine wish to be known, and every so often it surfaces, and you make a small attempt. And you make it with somebody safe. Somebody who will not make it awkward. Very often somebody who has demonstrated repeatedly, over decades, that they do not do this. And they respond the way they have always responded, which is inadequately. They change the subject, or they offer a solution, or they say something well-meant and slightly off. And you file the result. Not consciously, and not as a judgment of them, as a general finding about people. My darling, that is a badly designed experiment. You have tested a hypothesis about the whole of humanity using the one participant most likely to produce a negative result, and you have done it repeatedly, and each time the finding has been logged. And your sign, of all 12, is the one whose conclusions from evidence are most difficult to shift, because you gather carefully, and you do not conclude lightly, and once you have concluded, it takes a great deal to reopen. Now, my darling, before I go on, I want you to do something with me, and it will take 20 seconds. Think of the last time somebody asked how you were, in a way that was not merely a greeting. Now recall what you said. Do not judge it. Simply notice whether the answer you gave was one that could have been followed up, whether there was a way in, whether it ended with a question about them. You will know within about 2 seconds, and the speed with which you know is itself the finding. Hold it. I am going to ask you for it later. Now let me tell you about Edith. Edith was a Virgo client of mine, born at the very end of August, who came to me in her 60s, and who is the reason I made this reading. She had been widowed 4 years earlier, after a long marriage, and she had managed it, in her own description, well. She had handled the estate, supported her children through it, kept the house, returned to her volunteering within about 3 months. And she came to me because of something that had happened at a lunch. A woman she had known peripherally for years, not a close friend, had asked her how she was. And Edith had produced her answer, which she could recite to me because she had produced it perhaps 400 times, that she was managing. That it had been a difficult period, but that she had been very fortunate in her children. That everyone had been so kind. And the woman had said, no. Just that. And then, apparently, had waited. And Edith said to me, and she was still slightly indignant about it 4 months later, she just sat there. She did not say anything else. She simply looked at me and waited, and I could not get the conversation to move. I asked her what happened next. And she said, I told her the truth, which is that I do not know what to do with the evenings. My darling Virgos, 4 years. 4 years, and dozens of people, many of whom loved her a great deal more than this woman did, and none of them had ever declined the answer. And I want to be clear about why. They were not negligent. Edith's answer was excellent. It was gracious, it was complete, it acknowledged their concern, it thanked them for it, and it closed. Every single one of them respected a boundary that was being placed with considerable skill. One person refused, once, and it took about 4 seconds. Edith and that woman are close now. Not a replacement for the marriage, and Edith would not describe it in those terms. But she told me, sometime later, that she had not understood until that lunch that the reason nobody knew how she was doing was that she had been very good at answering the question. Now, before I go on, let me pause. If what I have said so far has landed, if one of the 5 produced a small drop, if Edith's 400 answers described something you have been producing yourself, tap that little like button below this video. It is a small gesture and it does something quite real. It tells YouTube that this matters to actual people, and it carries it to another Virgo who is at this moment giving an excellent and entirely closed answer to somebody who would have listened. Your like is how she finds it. And if you are not yet subscribed, this is the moment. Subscribe and turn on the bell. I make these readings for every sign, and I make them so they can be found whenever somebody needs them, rather than only during a particular week. Wait. Before I continue, I need to interrupt myself, because I know precisely what a portion of you is thinking, and I would rather deal with it directly than let it run underneath everything else. You are thinking, Aurora, this places it all on me. The people in my life genuinely are not capable of this. I have tried, and they cannot do it. Let me answer that plainly, because for some of you it is entirely true, and I refuse to be one more voice suggesting that a woman's isolation is a failure of her own communication. Some people cannot do this. That is real. There are people who love you sincerely and who do not possess the equipment, and asking them repeatedly to develop it is a project that will consume years and produce very little. And for some of you, the circumstances are genuinely narrow. You are the carer, or you are geographically isolated, or the people who could have done this have died, and I am not going to pretend that a change in your phrasing produces a person who is not there. So let me give you the distinction, and it is diagnostic and you can apply it tonight. Ask yourself whether anybody in your life has ever asked you a second question. Not you specifically about a difficulty. Anybody, at any time, about anything. Has any person in your circle ever declined your first answer and waited? If the answer is yes, even once, even years ago, even about something small, then the capacity is present in your field, and the problem is routing rather than absence. If the answer is genuinely no, across the whole of your life, then you are not being difficult to understand, my darling. You are among people who do not do this, and the honest advice is not about how you phrase things. It is that the field has to widen, which is a considerably larger project and which I am not going to reduce to a sentence. And I will say one more thing to those of you in the second situation, and I mean it seriously rather than as a formality. If what you are carrying is genuine and prolonged isolation, that is worth speaking to a professional about, and it is worth doing sooner than your sign will want to. Your sign is the least likely of the 12 to make that appointment, and the most likely to research it thoroughly at midnight instead. I would rather say that plainly to the 4 of you it applies to, than leave it out to keep the tone even. Now let me tell you the other kind of story, because I have told you the one where somebody was understood. Nell was a Virgo client of mine who came to me over a period of several years, and hers is the story I think about most on this subject. She had a mother. That is really the whole of it, and I suspect a number of you have just felt something. Her mother was not cruel. I want to establish that, because the version of this story where the mother is a villain is easier and is not what happened. She was a brisk, capable, rather impatient woman who had raised 4 children largely alone and who dealt with difficulty by getting on with things, and who had no facility whatsoever for the kind of attention Nell wanted and had never once, in 60 years, provided it. And Nell kept trying. Not constantly, and not obviously, but every so often, at intervals of a year or 2, she would make an attempt. She would say something slightly more real than usual, at a kitchen table, and wait. And her mother would respond the way she always responded, practically, with a suggestion, or by moving on. Or, on one occasion Nell described to me in some detail, by observing that Nell had always been the sensitive one, which was said without malice, and which landed on her like a verdict. And each time, Nell filed it. She said to me once, and this is the sentence I have carried, I keep going back to the same well and being surprised that it is dry. My darling Virgos, I want to be careful about the moral of this, because it is not that she should have given up on her mother, and I would not have told her to. It is that she was conducting the experiment in one location only. Nell had a sister who would have done it. She had a friend of 25 years who would have done it. She had, at one point, a colleague who tried and was gently deflected, and she did not fully register any of them as candidates, because at some level she was not looking to be understood in general. She was looking to be understood by the person whose understanding had been withheld, and no substitute counts when that is the actual shape of it. Her mother died without ever having done it, and what Nell told me afterward was not what I expected. She said, "I thought I would be devastated that it never happened. What I actually feel is that I spent 60 years auditioning for one person while several others were sitting in the room." Now let me name what is actually underneath all of this, because I have described the behaviors, and behaviors do not run without a reason, and the usual reason given is wrong for your sign. The usual explanation is that you are afraid of being a burden. Every article about your sign says so, and it is not quite it, and the imprecision matters because the wrong diagnosis produces the wrong remedy. You are not primarily afraid of being a burden. You are afraid of being a burden badly. Let me explain the distinction, because it is the whole of it. Your sign is willing to be a great deal of trouble to other people, provided the trouble is useful. You will stay up all night for somebody, cancel your own plans, carry a genuinely heavy load for a person who needs it, and you will not experience any of that as burdening them, because it is competent and it is directed, and it produces a result. What you cannot bear is to impose without producing anything, to take up somebody's time and attention with a feeling that has no solution, no request attached, no clear thing they can do. That is not being a burden in the ordinary sense. It is being a burden inefficiently, and inefficiency is the thing your sign was organized, very early, to avoid at all costs. And underneath that, one layer further down, is the real one. You believe that your acceptability is conditional on your usefulness. I want to say that slowly, because a great many of you have never had it said. Somewhere very early, you concluded that you were valued for what you managed, noticed, fixed, and carried, and that the version of you that simply needed things, without being useful about it, was not the version anybody had signed up for. And so you kept that version out of every room, permanently, as a kind of courtesy, and the courtesy has cost you the thing tonight is about. My darling, that belief is not true, and I cannot prove it to you from behind a desk, and the only proof that has ever worked is the experiment I am going to keep asking you to run. One unqualified sentence, in front of one chosen person, and the discovery, which is nearly universal and which still surprises every Virgo who makes it, that the room does not empty, that the person leans in rather than away, that being needed without being useful is not the disqualification you were promised it would be. Pause with me for a moment. I know this has been a great deal. I want to tell you why I made this reading. Virgos write to me more than any other sign, and there is a particular letter that arrives constantly and that I find harder to read than any other. It is not about being lonely. It is usually from somebody with a full life. It describes, in careful and well-organized prose, the experience of being surrounded by people and being the only one in the room who is paying attention, and it nearly always ends with an apology for having written. If this reading is bringing you something tonight, would you do me 3 small things? Like this video. It tells YouTube this matters to real people, and it carries it to another Virgo who is at this moment composing an apology for taking up somebody's time. Subscribe and turn on the bell if you have not, because I make these readings for every sign and I intend to keep making them. And write to me in the comments, and I want the specific thing rather than the general thing. Not that you feel unseen, because everybody in that comment section does, and it will not help any of you. Give me 1 sentence about your own life that you would ordinarily follow with a qualification, and do not include the qualification. That is the whole request. 1 sentence, and stop before the word but. And if you have been here a while, membership on this channel means readings reach you before they are published, and it means you and I actually speak in the comments, because I read member comments first, and I answer there more often and more personally than I am able to anywhere else. I will say, gently, that a comment section is not the same as a person in a room, and that everything I am describing tonight happens between 2 people who can see each other. I would rather be useful to you than be the thing you use instead. Now let me speak about choosing the listener, because Nell's story makes this the most important practical section in the reading, and almost nobody thinks about it deliberately. Being understood is not a general condition. It is something that happens with a particular person, and the particular person matters enormously, and your sign selects them badly, for reasons that are worth naming. Here is what your sign looks for in a confidant. Somebody safe. Somebody who will not make it awkward, who will not be burdened, who has the capacity to absorb it, and who will not require anything from you afterward. Notice that every one of those criteria is about protecting the other person, and none of them is about whether they can actually do it. So let me give you the criteria that matter, and there are 3. The first. Have they ever asked you a second question? That is the whole test, and it is the most reliable one I know. A person who has, even once, declined your first answer and waited, is a person with the equipment. It is a rarer capacity than people assume, and it is entirely visible from outside. The second. Do they tolerate an unresolved situation? Some people cannot sit with a difficulty that has no solution attached. They will offer suggestions, not from insensitivity, but from discomfort, and being offered a solution while you are describing a feeling is one of the more isolating experiences available. Watch how somebody behaves around a problem that cannot be fixed. Their behavior there tells you everything about what they will do with yours. And the third, which is the one your sign will resist most. Are they somebody who has been imprecise about themselves in front of you? Because a person who has said something unhedged and slightly excessive about their own life in your presence has demonstrated that they operate in that register, and a person who has never done so is unlikely to receive it well from you. My darling, this is why your sign's confidants are so frequently other Virgos and other Earth signs, and why those friendships are excellent and steady and are not, generally, where this particular thing happens. 2 people both being accurate at each other for 30 years is a fine relationship, and it is not the one that produces the experience I am describing tonight. And I want to be honest with you about what being understood actually costs, because I have been describing it as though it were straightforwardly good, and your sign will have noticed that I have not mentioned a price, and your sign does not trust anything offered without a price. There is one, and it is real, and you should know it before you go looking. Being understood means being changed by another person's view of you. While you are the only one who sees yourself accurately, you have complete control of the account. You are the sole author of the record, and the record can be maintained exactly as you have written it, and nobody can revise a comma of it. That is a genuine kind of safety, my darling, and it is the safety you have been choosing, and I am not going to pretend it is nothing. The moment somebody genuinely understands you, that ends. They now hold a version of you that you did not fully authorize. They will see something you did not mean to show, and they will name it sometimes, and their naming will occasionally be more accurate than your own account, which is the single most disorienting thing that can happen to a Virgo, because your account of yourself is the one document you have never allowed to be corrected. So it costs you sole authorship. It costs you the private, sealed, perfectly maintained version. And in exchange, you receive the thing you have wanted your whole life and have been unable to obtain by any amount of accuracy, which is to be met. I think it is worth it, my darling. I would not have built an hour on it otherwise. But I am not going to tell you it is free, because your sign would know I was lying, and the whole of this reading depends on your believing that I am telling you the truth. Now the practical part, and there are 4 things and they are deliberately small. But first, 3 signs that it has already begun, because a portion of you are certain that nothing is changing and that this describes a situation you will simply be in forever, and 2 of these 3 are usually already present. The first. Somebody in your life has, at some point, told you something about themselves that they clearly do not tell most people. That is not a small thing, and your sign tends to file it as ordinary. A person who discloses to you is a person who has sensed that you can hold it, and disclosure very often runs both ways, once one person opens the direction. If somebody has trusted you with something real, the channel exists, and it has only ever been used in one direction. The second. There is a person whose company leaves you feeling lighter rather than more tired, and you have not examined why. My darling, your sign finds most social contact depleting, because you are running the instrument the whole time. A person around whom you are not depleted is very often a person around whom you have, without noticing, stopped monitoring, and not monitoring is the closest your sign comes to resting in company. That person is a candidate, and you have been experiencing the evidence as a pleasant mood. And the third. You have, recently, wanted to say something and not said it. That wanting is new, or newly noticeable, and it is not a problem, it is the instrument turning around. For years you did not even feel the impulse, because it had been closed off so completely. Feeling it, even as a swallowed sentence, is the first motion of the thing this whole reading is about, and it means the door you thought was bricked over is merely shut. If two of those are true for you, my darling, this is not a description of your permanent condition. It is a description of a wall with a door in it, and the four things below are how you find the handle. The four things. The first. Leave the answer open once. Not a confession, and not a change of personality. Once this week, when somebody asks how you are, answer in a way that has a loose end in it, and then do not pivot. Say the true thing, and then stop talking, and do not ask about them. The silence will be about 3 seconds, and it will be genuinely uncomfortable, and it is the entire technique. Most people, given 3 seconds and an unfinished answer, will ask. The second. Remove one qualification a day. Not all of them. 1. When you catch yourself about to say, but it is fine, or others have it worse, or I am probably making too much of it, stop before it and let the sentence end where it ended. Your sign will experience this as inaccuracy and as a small dishonesty, and I am going to address that directly in a few minutes, because it is the whole of what I am saving for the end. The third. Say one thing while it is still happening. The next time you are in the middle of something difficult, and not after, tell one person that you are in the middle of it. You do not have to ask for anything. You do not have to have a request attached, which your sign will want to supply, so that the disclosure has a purpose. Middle, not afterward, that is the only instruction. And the fourth. Choose the right person on purpose. Take the 3 criteria I gave you and apply them to the people in your life, deliberately, this week, as an assessment rather than as a feeling. Your sign is superb at assessment. You have simply never turned it on this particular question, because you have been treating being understood as something that either happens to a person or does not. It does not happen to a person. It happens with a specific individual who has the capacity, and identifying them is a task, and it is a task you are unusually well equipped for. Let me speak briefly to a few dimensions, because this loneliness lives differently depending on where it sits. In a marriage or a long partnership, this is the most painful version, and it is more common in your sign than in any other, because a Virgo can run an entire shared life competently for decades and never once be known inside it. Your partner relies on you, accurately, and mistakes the reliance for intimacy, and so do you, sometimes, until a quiet evening reveals that the person who knows your schedule to the minute has no idea what you have been carrying. The intervention here is not a dramatic conversation. It is one unqualified sentence at the kitchen table, and the shock, for a great many Virgos, is that the partner was available the whole time and had simply been trained by years of your competence to believe you did not need it. In friendship, your sign is very often the friend everybody relies on and nobody worries about. You are the one who is fine, structurally, in the group, and the position is comfortable and it is a trap. Because a person who is always fine is a person nobody checks on. If you have been quietly wounded that your friends do not ask how you are, my darling, consider that you have answered fine, expertly, for so long that asking has come to feel unnecessary. That is not their failure. It is the success of your performance. With your family of origin. This is where it started for most of you, and it is the hardest place to change it, because the roles are oldest there and most defended. You were the capable one, or the easy one, or the one who did not need managing because there was already enough to manage. And a role assigned in childhood is not renegotiated by a single conversation at 50. I would not send you into that expecting to be understood. I would send you elsewhere first, to practice being known by someone who did not cast you, and I would let the family be the last place rather than the first. And in your own relationship with yourself. The deepest version of this, my darling, is that you do not extend to yourself the understanding you are waiting to receive. You give yourself the same closed, qualified, efficient account you give everybody else. You are the witness even to your own life, standing slightly outside it, assessing. The ritual I am about to give you is, more than anything, a way of turning the understanding inward first. Because a person who has never once been gentle with her own account finds it very hard to believe anybody else could be. Now let me give you the ritual, and it is short, and it is more difficult than it sounds. Find 20 minutes and somewhere you will not be interrupted. A green candle for the earth and your own element, and a white one for clarity, if you like them, and if you have neither, my darling, this works entirely without them. Sit and take 7 slow breaths, longer on the exhale than the inhale. Now write 1 paragraph about the last 2 years of your life. And here is the instruction that makes this a ritual rather than a diary entry. Write it as though you were describing somebody else's 2 years to a person who cares about her. Not your own. Hers. Third person. She had a difficult period. She was managing something that nobody could see. She did this, and then this happened, and she was not all right for a while. Write it that way, in full, and do not qualify anything, because you would not qualify it if it were somebody else. You would not write, and of course others have had it worse, about a friend. You would consider that a strange thing to add. When you have finished, read it back once, out loud. And notice what you feel toward the woman in that paragraph, which will be considerably warmer and considerably less impatient than what you feel toward yourself, and which will very likely surprise you. Then keep it. Do not destroy it. Because that paragraph is the true account, my darling, and it is the one you have never given anybody, and if the day comes when somebody declines your first answer and waits, that paragraph is what you would say if you could get to it, and having written it once means you can. And now, my darling Virgo, I want to give you the thing I told you at the beginning, that I was saving for the end. I said it would be uncomfortable for about 30 seconds, and it will, because it concerns the one quality you value most in yourself, and it is going to suggest that you have been using it against yourself. Give me the full minute. It is the qualification. The but. The and, of course, others have it worse. The it is probably nothing. The small correcting clause your sign attaches to nearly every statement it makes about its own life. You experience that clause as honesty. That is the whole of it, and it is why it has never occurred to you to examine it. Adding the qualification feels like accuracy, like refusing to overstate, like the intellectual integrity of not claiming more than the situation warrants. Your sign is loyal to precision above almost everything, and the qualification feels like precision, and so it has felt, your whole life, like the most honest part of what you say. My darling, it is not honesty. It is control. Let me explain, because that is a hard thing to say to somebody, and I am not going to say it and leave it lying there. When you state something true about your own life and then immediately qualify it, you are not making the statement more accurate. The statement was already accurate. What you are doing is managing how the other person is allowed to respond to it. You are reaching across and adjusting their reaction before they have had it. You are telling them, in advance, how much this is permitted to matter, and you are setting the figure low. And you do that because a response you did not control might be the wrong size. It might be too much. It might be pity, which your sign cannot bear. It might be a solution offered to a feeling. It might be somebody making it about themselves. So rather than state the thing and risk receiving a response you have not vetted, you state the thing and attach the response to it yourself. Pre-approved, small, safe. That is not accuracy, my darling. Accuracy would be to say the true thing and let it land at its true weight. What you are doing is the opposite of accuracy. You are deliberately understating, in the name of not overstating, and you have been calling the understatement honesty for your entire life. And here is the part that is going to land, and I am sorry for it, and it is the most useful thing I have to give you tonight. Precision about yourself, offered without disclosure, is a form of self-erasure. You have been describing yourself accurately to everybody and disclosing yourself to nobody, and you have believed those were the same act, and they are not even close. A person can give a perfectly accurate account of her life that contains no admission whatsoever. Accuracy tells them what happened. Disclosure tells them what it cost you. And your sign has been supplying the first with tremendous skill and withholding the second so completely that you have forgotten the second exists, and then experiencing the result as being unseen. They cannot see you, my darling, because you have been handing them the report and keeping the person. Do you remember the card? The Two of Cups. 2 people, each holding a cup out toward the other. And the caduceus above them, the 2 serpents on the staff, which is the emblem of Mercury, which is your ruler. I said at the time that what was being asked of you was not more perception. You have enough perception. It was transmission, which is the half of Mercury your sign does not use. This is the transmission, not more accuracy about yourself, which you already produce in abundance and which changes nothing. The one unqualified sentence. The statement with nothing attached to manage the other person's response. The cup held out with the true weight left in it. And I want to be clear about what I am and am not asking, because your sign will now overcorrect and decide it must become a person who says everything, and that is not it, and that would be miserable for you and for everybody near you. I am not asking you to stop being accurate. Accuracy is your gift, and the world needs it, and I would not take it from you. I am asking you to notice the difference between an accurate sentence and an honest one, and to let, occasionally, in front of one carefully chosen person, one sentence go out without the clause that tells them how little it is allowed to weigh. That is the whole of it, not a personality, one sentence, without the but. Because the qualification was never protecting you from being overestimated, my darling. It was protecting you from being met. And you have been so well protected, for so long, and so precisely, that you have arrived at the exact thing the protection was meant to prevent, which is a life in which you are perfectly understood as a set of facts and not known by a single soul as a person. The wall is real. I said that at the beginning, and I meant it. 20 years of accurate reports, filed and filed and filed. It is simply that you built it out of honesty, and it was made of something else, and you are the only one who can take down a wall you did not know you were holding up. Leave one sentence unqualified this week, my darling, in front of the person you have chosen on purpose. That is the door. It has always been the door. You have been standing in front of it, describing it accurately, for years. My dear Virgo, before I let you go, 3 small things. 1. If any part of this reading found you tonight, if one of the 5 behaviors described you, if Edith's silence or Nell's audition, or the thing about the qualification landed somewhere real, tap that like button. It is the simplest way to tell YouTube to carry this to another Virgo who is at this moment ending a true sentence with a clause that makes it smaller. 2. Subscribe and turn on the bell. I make these readings for every sign, and I make them so they can be found whenever somebody needs them, rather than only during a particular week. If you become a member, readings reach you before they are published, and you and I actually speak in the comments, because I read member comments first. 3. And this is the one I care about most. Give me the one sentence. About your own life, with nothing after it. I read every single comment, truly, and I want to tell you one more time why I am asking for exactly that, and not for the story, which would be far more interesting to read. Because a comment section full of Virgos explaining themselves, in full, with context and fairness and every qualification in place, would be the most articulate and the most lonely thing on this platform. Everybody would be perfectly clear and nobody would be met. But a comment section in which 40 women have each written one sentence about their own life and simply stopped, with nothing after it, no but, no others have it worse, no it is probably nothing, is 40 women doing the exact thing this entire hour has been about, in public, at the same time. And the Virgo who scrolls it at 2 in the morning will not need me to explain any of this, because she will have read 40 unqualified sentences, and she will understand, faster than I have managed to explain it, that it is allowed. And if this reading gave you something and you ever want to say thank you more directly, a super thanks is never expected and always felt. And it is a genuine part of how I keep making these readings as carefully as I make them. If you know another Virgo who explains herself perfectly and is known by no one, send this to her tonight. You may not realize how much a single share matters. It is how this work finds the person who needs it. Thank you, my darling. This community has become something I genuinely did not expect when I began. Someone finally understands you. That is the title, and it is true. And I want to end by telling you what has to happen first, because it is not what the title implies. It is not that the right person arrives and sees through the wall. Nobody sees through a wall, my darling. That is what a wall is for. It is that you hand one person, once, a sentence with the wall left out of it. You have been understood as a report for 20 years. Accurately, completely, and by nobody. Say the one sentence. Stop before the but. That is the whole of it, and it has been available the entire time, and you are the only person who was ever standing in the way. I am Madame Aurora from Manhattan, and I love you, my dear Virgo. I will see you in the next reading.